I have never played a Resident Evil game. I don't know how, I just must have somehow missed it. When the first game came out on the PS1, I was too young to be interested enough in playing it, and my older brother just seemed to never get around to buying or renting it from a store, and that would have been my only way to be exposed to this franchise. As I grew older and eventually got my own N64 and my own PS2 and my own GameCube, I guess the franchise was already too established for me to take interest and to just jump into the series without knowing any of the story from the previous games. It just never piqued my interest. So here we are at the end of 2017, almost 2018, and a franchise that is considered to be a staple in the horror genre hasn't ever been experienced by me yet. Upon noticing that Resident Evil Revelations and Resident Evil Revelations 2 are both available on the Nintendo Switch for a relatively fair price, I decided maybe it's time I give this franchise a shot after all of these years. But I ran into the same issue I ran into so many years ago. I really didn't know where to start. Are Revelations self-contained? Can I jump right in there? Should I start at the beginning and dust off my old PlayStation? Do I play Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 0 first? I didn't really know where to begin with this franchise, so I did a simple Google search and read through some forums and Steam reviews, and most people said to start at the remaster of the remake of the original. I know, it's confusing. And then play Resident Evil 0. Sounded good enough to me, and I bought it on a key site for only $3, a pretty low risk purchase if you ask me. And apparently this game was a remake of the original PlayStation 1 Resident Evil that was put on the GameCube, and then it was remade for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. So I'm playing the remake of the original game. And after downloading the game, I gave it my best shot, and it didn't really work out for me. Don't get me wrong, I think I finally see why the series is so popular and why so many people liked it. But for me, someone coming into the franchise blind and starting at the beginning, it just wasn't something I could enjoy. But before you click off this video angrily, hear me out. The opening sequence is really spectacular. Considering from what I understand, it's a digitalized version of a live-action cutscene from the original game. But I love the idea of escaping to a mansion for refuge and having no idea what's going on there, and having to just go and explore the mansion and find clues to figure out what is going on and where your crew is. My first encounter with a zombie actually had me scared and excited at the same time. It was a really unique feeling, and without spoiling the story for anyone who's potentially looking into maybe playing this game, it was actually interesting enough to make me want to keep going and keep exploring the story and mansion that this game had to offer. But within 20 minutes of playing the game, some issues really started to affect my gameplay. The first issue I had was with the camera, and I get that it's a unique style and that it worked for the game when it first came out, and I'm not faulting the game too much for using this style. It just doesn't translate to someone who's used to playing in either a third person or a first person type of game. The fixed camera was really clunky to me, at least in 2017. It probably worked out a lot better when the game originally released, but I'm now a modern gamer, and this older, archaic type of camera angle just didn't work well with me. Sure, I found myself running up and down the stairs because it shifted my control scheme every time the camera changed, but whatever, the game's really old, let's not fault it. The inventory system was also pretty outdated, leaving me to have to go back to the safe haven often, but whatever, the music in there was pretty sweet, so I didn't get too upset over that. My real issues came down to just two different things. The saving function in this game is one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced in a game. Essentially, you need to find items called ink ribbons throughout the mansion to go to a typewriter to save your game. Now, most likely, there are plenty of them around if you're looking for them, but for the first hour of the game, I only had 3, so I was super worried about running out of saves, which later just turned me off from ever saving the game because I was afraid that I would use all my saves too early and down the road I would run out of the objects I could use to save my game. I assume playing on an easier difficulty would be right for me if I didn't save too often, especially after a few failed attempts where I died quickly on, and I was so devastated after playing for 2.5 hours and losing everything I had worked for. And when you die, it's game over. You can only go back to where you last saved, or you're back at the very beginning of the game, and that was extremely frustrating when I finally died on a in particular boss fight. My other complaint is how overwhelmingly lost I was when playing the game. I I don't know if I was missing something, but after the first hour, I had no idea what I was supposed to do, or even how I was expected to figure out what I was supposed to do. I ended up trying to use a text guide online to follow along, which was really poorly written, so I gave up on that and resorted to watching someone else play the game on YouTube and mimic what I saw on their screen. How was I supposed to know that I was supposed to use the dog whistle outside? How was I supposed to know to keep inventory space open for the dog collar? And how was I supposed to know to inspect the in particular dog collar to find a gem, and then inspect that gem to find out that it's a fake key that I'm supposed to use in a different room in order to stay alive when some spikes try to kill me? But I'm not too frustrated at the game for this, if that makes any sense. I guess I was more frustrated that I didn't have the same attention span to explore every element of the game that someone who had the game back in the day probably did. I think before the days of the internet, or before the days of these high action speed video games, I probably would have been the type of player who would have failed and then tried again, and tried again, and tried again. But after losing my progress at the first boss fight of the game, I put this game away forever. But this purchase wasn't in vain either. Like I said earlier, I love the overall concept of this game. I love the mansion, I love the mystery surrounding what the hell could be going on, and I was genuinely curious as to where the story would go. So I ended up watching a full Let's Play of the game with no commentary, and to put this in perspective, I never watched Let's Plays. In the last 5 years, I could count all of the Let's Plays I have ever watched on one hand. Although I couldn't experience this game the way it was originally intended, I fully believe I was able to appreciate the game for the legacy it created, and the gripping story that it developed. I would still recommend this game to anyone who wants to check out, even if they don't finish it, if they can find it for the right price. I don't think I'm going to move on to Resident Evil 0 just yet. I'm still really intrigued by this franchise, and I might give Resident Evil 4 a go next, because I hear that it's a completely different experience than the others, but still really praised by fans in the series, and it kind of led to its own legacy in its own sense.